So this webinar is from chaos to clarity. Conversation with United Land Services, Shane Blair, business system support manager. We wanted to get on and really talk about kind of the pre, where the industry was or is today, where we want to get to, and the tools, Top Green and some of the other tools that are out there helping us kind of bridge that gap and where we see the future. So I'll let Shane introduce himself quickly, and then we'll get rolling.
Sean, thank you. So my name's Shane Blair. I joined the industry in 1994. So I've been working my way through different functions and different positions within the industry. I've done pretty much all of them at this point. But right now I'm with United Land Services. Like Sean said, I'm the business process manager. What that means is I manage a lot of different systems for United, which work towards operations. So I do the implementation, I do the training, I do the support. Crew Intel is one of those, our most recent that we're diving into. And so that's kind of a little bit about me, what I do for United, and looking forward to seeing any questions that pop up from the audience. So if you have those, remember, just please put them in and we'll get to them as we get to that section, or again, at the end of the webinar, there'll be some open Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So how long have you been with ULS now?
Almost 3 years.
Specifically in this role, business, that's what you came on?
Yeah, actually, I started with them as an account manager. An old boss of mine worked here, and he was trying to build a branch and reached out to me and said, hey, I really need you. And I didn't want to do it. And it took him about a month to beat me down enough I was like, all right, fine, I'll come help. And they had just adopted another system that I had some experience with. And I started, getting the branch in line with that system, and it just kind of molded into what I do now. So it's been a good ride. ULS is a big company. They're continuing to grow, so it's a good opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah. That explains the account management background and your other backgrounds, why our conversations are so fruitful, right, around what we're doing here with Top Green.
Yeah, it definitely helps to know what these guys go through and know what challenges and difficulties they face kind of outside of what we're discussing today. You really have to understand that to be able to have a good knowledge of how to implement things the right way and what training is going to make sense to them and what's important in their role.
Yeah, one thing that I've learned, and just a little bit of a background with me. So I've been, working on the software side within the industry for the last 4 or 5 years, and I was with another solution, designed for the landscape industry, business management, and I had some connections there. Brian Moores, Corey Beidler, and Sashi was working with Brian, and I was connected through Corey. And provided the opportunity to come on board with Top Green. So with that business management side of things, understanding purchasing and hours, there was still a gap between production, sales, and production sales, that I really seen Top Green as being able to kind of fill that gap. And I always kind of felt like it was a missing piece. So it was an exciting opportunity to join Top Green. And to your point, right, understanding other things outside of what we're talking about today. It's not just, right, we don't always make decisions on logic. There's an emotional component, right, that goes into a lot of these discussions. And it's something I've learned over the last, 4 or 5 years. It's not as simple as saying, logically, if you do this, this, and this is the outcome. It should be easy, right?
I used to have a boss that would always say, listen, we don't make widgets, right? There's a lot of variables in our day-to-day operations. I mean, you make a plan Monday morning at 7 a.m. by 7:15, you're creating a whole new plan. So part of the challenge and what we're looking at when we look at these different systems that we use is, is this something that's actually going to provide value?
Yep.
Is this something that the team can actually use, or is this just another thing for them to do? Because if it's that, we're not going to use that. We're trying to streamline operations like a lot of other companies out there, and that's part of my job is evaluating these things and saying, hey, does this make sense? Where can this provide some value for us, and can the teams use it in a reasonable manner?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you can get inundated with systems, right? You need your guys that are in the field to be in the field, and there's
Yeah,
rules, and that's something I think we're working through.
there's thousands of them out there. I mean, there's all different kinds of things, and some of it will work for some people, and some of it works for others. It's the nature of our industry. Like I said, a lot of variables, a lot of change, and people that have been in this for a while understand that. They know.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, right? When we're talking about what Top Green has been designed to do here for the industry, it's twofold, right? A lot of times when I talk to folks, a sale gets made, there might be some type of plan, maybe on Google Maps, kind of drawn out. But I've heard the comment, you pat the crew on the back and you say, hey, we got 40 hours on this site. Good luck, right? And you give them kind of something to work with. They go, they site walk it, they see it, and then they start doing work. They start performing it and developing their own efficient ways to doing this. So,
well, that's kind of how we got here. I mean, we're all sitting in a room, right? Myself and other leadership, and we're talking about our estimates. We had made some adjustments in the software that we use and our estimating, our production rates, and we're like, okay, well, how are we going to measure this? And our CEO is a huge fan of time studies, loves it. Once, we were actually in there talking about doing those and site audits and all this different stuff to be able to compare our actual labor, on the ground to our estimate. Anybody that's done one of these, kind of the old school way is you print out this map of the site, maybe it's Google Maps, and you're drawing on it, you're looking at the estimate, you're comparing things, and then literally you drive out there and you sit in a truck and you watch the guys work. Well, even that breeds inefficiencies because the team doesn't work the same when you're sitting there watching them, right? On top of that, it's a huge time sink. Like if you have to go look at one or two sites, okay, you can pull that off throughout the day. But if you need to look at 10 or 15, and what if you have jobs that are across other markets, other branches? What's the cost to go and sit and do that? And so when, we had that initial discussion with you about what this product could bring to us, we're like, oh, this is exactly what we've been looking for. And that's kind of how we got into this and where we're at today. It's not like we haven't had our challenges, but we're certainly moving in the right direction, and just the data that you can pull out of this. I mean, we'll get into some of that a little bit later in the webinar, but it's, the opportunity is there. It's very detailed, and it can change the way you view your operations and certainly uncover some hidden truths.
For sure. Yeah. And that's, going into that kind of that next point. Actually, let's kind of introduce ULS a little bit here as well. So founded in 2001, 2025 revenue, 242 million. That was a growth of about 18% from 2024. If you could talk a little bit about, how you feel your systems today and the systems that you're looking at, as such as Top Green, are impacting your ability to continue that growth successfully.
Yeah, it's a big number. I mean, we're growing fast, and one of the challenges with that growth is, the sustainability and scalability of our systems. We have to make sure that whatever we put together and we're using is not just good for a few branches in this market. It's got to be scalable across our entire company, and that covers more than just landscaping. United Land Services is in a lot of different industries. So not only do we have to have systems that manage for just landscaping, but there's multiple other markets out there that we're taking part in. And
Got it.
as we go through and we continue to grow at this rate and maybe more into the future, it's certainly a discussion that we keep having. Myself and leadership, we sit down and say, this is what's working for, X amount of branches right now. Can I double this? What happens if I triple it? And that was one of the intriguing things about Crew Intel is it's easily scalable.
Yeah, I think you brought up kind of the site work component of United Land, right? And that's an area where the vests and the planning may be able to be used later, right? So I mean, we're having kind of offline conversations, right? That's not our focus right now, but not only can we help with the maintenance side, where our focus is today, early stage, but how can we help, some of these higher dollar value, quicker jobs, right, where it's not 3-4 year contract.
Yeah, and that's part of the growth. That's part of learning kind of from each other a little bit. We've made some adjustments based on information that you've given us, and I think you guys have done the same. So it's definitely part of the learning curve, as you will. It's just necessary. You have to keep learning, keep growing, keep changing.
For sure. So from that, we'll kind of go into our first poll question here. Your biggest efficiency headache. So when it comes to managing your commercial landscaping crews, what's currently the biggest headache for achieving peak efficiency? While everyone in the webinar is answering that, if you could answer that, and we'll discuss, kind of the highest reported answers here. But Shane, if you could, from your current lens, a business process lens and account management lens, what was the biggest headache, and why did you guys decide to start working with Top Green?
So can we add another one at the bottom, like all of the above?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it feels that way. From an account manager perspective, you serve a lot of different bosses, right? You have your bosses that are, hey, you need to drive efficiency. You have your clients, hey, you need to drive quality. You have your guys you're trying to manage. It's a lot, and it comes at you all at once. For us, though, I think the real catalyst behind our partnership right now was is our estimate accurate? Because in this industry, you survive on a very minimal margin, and every little bit of labor, the extra labor or materials that goes into a job erodes that down. And so we're trying to get to a point where our estimate is as close as possible. And this tool has really granted us that ability to look at, this is your actuals over time. Now we can compare that to our estimate. It not only gives us kind of real-time information, but it's also lending further into that renewal piece. So just out of the ones that we have here, I think it is the first one. For me, it's just that inconsistent job completion, and we're still seeing that. We're not perfect. We're not doing everything perfect. We've got growth and learning to do in the field as well. It's not just what happens here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the thing. There's so many components that go into this, right? We could talk about efficiency, but what about quality, completion percentage? What about the guys, right? There's a lot of time. We talked about, when we first got on the weather in Florida, right? It's hot. They're out there. They have a lot of services, manual tasks, walking around. So we want to take all of these things and find kind of that middle ground, right? Efficiency, quality, and a completion. At a 100% completion, right? I mean, that's the goal. If we're selling this contract with these services, we want 100% completion, throughout the promised time frame.
Yeah, and that's where some experience comes into play too, because especially in this market. And I know people are from all different areas, and I can only speak to what happens here in Florida. But typically, what happens is after lunch, your production starts to ramp down.
Yeah.
Temperature's going up. The guys have been on it all day. It's not an easy job. They're out there working hard.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's unrealistic to expect, this level plane of production from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. or whatever the hours are. But what you can do is you can see not only their production, but their path of motion. And some of that is tied to, hey, I'm not asking you to work harder. I'm asking you to just walk this direction, just old path of motion maps, right? And that can even help with your efficiency. Just where do you park the truck? Where do you set your gas cans? These are things that people in the industry struggle with every single day in maintenance.
Yeah, and I think, through conversations that I had, at the previous company I was with, and since being here at Top Green and seeing some of this data, right? To your point, in the afternoon, a lot of times, we'll see production kind of slow down. But in that same light, we also see maybe some wasted or unnecessary steps earlier in the day that could be causing, right, some more burnout. So
yeah,
I think it's important that this isn't just a tool to micromanage and hammer the crew on, small, break times, things like that. We want to understand the baseline. But if we can improve efficiency, we can also improve the number of steps, right, needed and the amount of effort to keep the same output.
Yeah, that's correct. So say, I'm walking. If you're starting with an edger, you want to start and end back at the truck if you're edging, right? But if the guy's not doing that, he's just going from point A to point Z, with no real plan or rhyme to why he's doing it that way. And we're all guilty of that. We're all guilty of handing over a truck and trailer with a crew leader that we trust to run that truck, and just, even myself, I've done, assume that this guy just knows the best way to do it. That's not always the case. Sometimes you'll see these guys actually overperform the plan. And then you're like, oh, these guys are rock stars. But often what you see is just those little inefficiencies that when you add them up, actually create a big number.
Yeah, we were on a call. Somebody had used kind of this analogy. When you look at like sports teams, right? You have these athletes that we see as peak performers, right? Making tens of millions of dollars annually. But there's folks in the back, right? Kind of watching these videos, watching movements, watching some of these decisions and choices. When they break off a route, when they curl hook. Even though these guys are at the top of the top, there's guys in the back watching film to tell them about things that these guys don't even know that they're doing, or are aware, but they don't know what the impact is having, right, on the outcome of a play or a game.
Correct. I mean, you constantly have to review the performance. That's what we do every single day. You see it in the quality. You see it in the relationship you have with the customer. It's all performance review.
Exactly. So this is an example of something that we've been talking about. So when we're really speaking of efficiency on these sites, there's a few areas. So dead walking, you alluded to it, right? So grabbing a string trimmer and following a path around a property as such that when you get done with the string trimmer, you've hit all of your areas of responsibility and are ending kind of near where the vehicle is parked, right? So if we're looking at this, maybe theatrical effect, right? We're looking, what we see here is different colors. So red is a guy, pink is a guy, blue is a guy, right? So what we see is there's a lot of movement. The green is the turf area, right? So we can see, where the areas of operation where work needs to happen, but we see a lot of movement up and down, the roadways. So can you speak a little bit to this? Maybe, just from experience in the past, what this conveys to you, and where you see the opportunity with.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's exactly what we've been discussing this whole time. It's the planned motion. All right, this guy could be riding a mower up and down the streets. Maybe he's got a backpack blower on, something that he's not supposed to be doing, or he's just randomly walking back and forth. The other thing, and this is something we kind of found out, is this could be a service that just wasn't part of our initial plan too. This guy could be, he's picking up weeds out of beds. He's doing whatever. The point is that there's something happening here that's not part of the plan, and that's why I want to reiterate, this isn't to be used as the hammer, right? You don't want to beat your guys down with this. You want to have them part of the solution, and part of that is when you see something like this, gather up the guys and say, hey guys, this is kind of how you went through it. If we stick to this plan, you're going to have to walk less. You're going to spend less time out here in the sun, and you're going to be able to do this job a little bit faster and hopefully a little bit better. So when we see things like this, that's kind of what we're doing. We're looking at this, say, okay, well, I'm not going to call this guy up and beat him down about it. I want to get with the crew. I want to get with the leadership of that branch and say, hey, if we just do these things a little bit different, right, it's actually going to be less work for you guys. And that's something that we believe we can achieve with this.
For sure. Yeah. So this one, we haven't focused on the plan. You and I, we have some other properties that we've been focusing on, but with this site, we know according to mow, trim, edge, and blow, it's 2 hours and 2 minutes on site for 4 guys, right? So 8 hours and 8 minutes. And to your point, that's doing those services with production rates that you're using in the estimation process, right?
Right.
So your square footage of 65,000 on a 52 inch or 48, I think this is a 52, 4,000 linear feet for a string trimmer, or 7,500 for a hard, right? Those kinds of things, 9,000 for a hard edge. We're using that to say not only are these the services that need to happen, these are the people that you have available and the equipment that are going to go do those services. Let's balance, the Gantt out. So from this visit here, we had 15 hours and 30 minutes on site for 4 guys. So under 4 hours with 9 hours and 41 minutes of actual movement and production.
Yeah. And that's where the opportunity lies. So can we get this to plan? Can we get it under plan? That's where we're digging into this data and this information to try to figure out.
Yeah. And we'll talk about it later when we talk, future, right, where things are going, KPI dashboards and those kinds of things that you've suggested, right? So as a partner with Top Green, early on, a lot of these conversations, here's what we have, here's the data, here's what we're seeing, and through your feedback, right, through your leadership team and yourself, saying, hey, this is great, but if we can see it this way, right, how do we have a dashboard to easily identify, these things instead of having to look at this. All right, so poll number 2, your view on AI in landscaping. So in a second here, the poll should pop up. When you think about artificial intelligence or AI in commercial landscaping, what is your primary perception? So is it exciting? Is there potential for significant efficiency gains? Unsure. How it applies to boots on the ground, concerns about the complexity, implementation, change management, potential threat to traditional jobs or work methods, or not something that you've really considered?
I think this raises an interesting question because you think about AI, but it's really technology. How's technology changed landscaping in the last 10 years? I used to go out and measure properties with a wheel, just wheel off the whole thing. You're measuring the bed edge, the hard edge. A lot of people don't do that anymore. There's software solutions out there that can do that for you, and it's very accurate. So that started some of the change, right? And now we're at the point where things are changing even more. We have the AI, we have autonomous mowing. We have, a lot of different things that are coming up into the industry, and you have to take a look at these things and say, hey, does this make sense for me, my company, and my crews? Maybe some of it does, maybe some of it doesn't, but you certainly have to consider it at this point. It's just the way the future's moving.
Yeah, it's a touchy topic because we're all kind of curious, right, with robotics and AI and what that means for traditional labor. And there's opportunities, right? It kind of depends on what lens you're viewing it through, right? There are opportunities, right? If we want to continue to better ourselves and better the folks that are around us, right? There's always going to be an opportunity for those folks, right? We continue to work hard. We fight through adversity. We're always looking for an opportunity to improve ourselves and the others. And, there's always going to be an opportunity for those folks. The fact of the matter is not everybody is necessarily that way. And I think some of these things, we can highlight it and we can take corrective action and kind of maybe help them improve. And in some cases, we have to understand and realize that you can't improve everybody, right? So there's always going to be opportunity for work.
It's just, it's a different perception, right? There's guys I know that still use pen and pad, man. That's just their go-to. They're always going to have that yellow pad in their truck with the ink pen, and that's how they keep track of everything. They're making crew schedules, they're doing everything on that, and that's fine if that works for you. There are other solutions out there, but it takes a little bit of a change of perception and maybe process even to be able to adopt some of that stuff, and that's why I'm excited to be part of this and just the changes that are happening in the industry right now.
For sure, yeah. It all depends on where you want to get to, right? If operating on pen and paper gets you to what your goal is, whatever you want to achieve, then continue, right? If you have
stick with what works for you, certainly. But I would challenge everybody to just try to keep an open mind about some of the other opportunities that exist out there.
For sure. So I think now, through a couple of polls here, we can navigate to the adoption piece, right? This is, it's not a silver bullet. So, there's work that has to be done on both ends, right? You and I have conversations every week. We're working with branch manager and, account managers. But if you could kind of set the stage, we have this adoption piece, but set the stage. So before adopting Top Green and what has had to change for you now with, the vests and the planning piece.
Yeah. So not everything's rainbows and sunshine. There's certainly been some challenges. I mean, we kind of discussed where we were at before already. But some of the challenges, and it was things that I didn't even consider when we first, started discussing implementing this project. It's like, oh, the guys are going to wear the vest. We're going to get all this data. Everything's going to be wonderful. We've had some challenges, certainly. Where do you put the vest? All our branches don't have power on site where the crews deploy from. So that's another challenge. How do you overcome that if you want to use this program in an area where you don't have power? How to hang them up? Something as simple as just plugging them in to get charged every night. We're 6 months in, we're still having struggles with that. It takes a little bit of being kind of constantly involved in it. Mm-hmm. And then, you have to understand your team a little bit too. You have to get that buy-in. And we worked on that from the very beginning. We've had other branches that are, more receptive than some. Some guys see it as just a way to kind of keep track of them throughout the day. And, I've explained many times, I don't care what time you guys go to the gas station. It doesn't matter to me in the least bit. We're trying to see what the production is against our estimates so that we can estimate better and maybe get you guys those extra hours that you say you need. Be able to find those. Because ultimately, we're trying to take care of the customer the best way we can, but we're also trying to look out for our employees. it's not all just about, spreadsheet landscaping. That's a dangerous position to be in. You have to maintain the relationship with your crews as well as your customers. Nobody can do all this by themselves. And so that's an important aspect too. And so as much as I can kind of push and push to charge the best, wear the best, put the beacons on all the equipment,
Yep.
you have to kind of take it with be a little bit easy on it as well, because you do want the buy-in.
Yep.
And so that's just kind of a handful of the challenges we've had. We are looking to roll it out in other areas. But what's good about it is, since we identified all those challenges the first rollout, the second one will go much easier because we already know what to look for. We know what kind of conversations we need to have. We know, how to get the equipment set up, how to get the setup right, and
Actually,
where to go.
this might be a good time to drop. So we've been talking and learning from this as well, right? So, we've talked about, additional branch with you guys and rolling this out. What we want to do on our end, right, is a 2-day workshop, right? And so with somebody that recently came on board, we've reviewed some of the challenges that we had with you and, some of these other early adopters. And I went out and I spent, 3 days. We kind of involved different stakeholders, and what we're seeing are the positive results from that. So now we're taking a step back and saying, okay, now how do we go back and maybe fix or help improve, some of those adoption practices. So
yeah, I mean, we've said it many times on this webinar already. You have to be continually learning.
Yep.
Not everything's going to go exactly how you plan it. It's nature of the beast. But you learn, you change and adapt.
So what we have up on the screen here is another property we've been looking at. This one is unique contractually, right? There's some things that limit maybe the ability to improve it immediately. Kind of, I think how Shane and I have discussed this is it's something we can kind of put in a bucket, right? So depending on where we are contractually, maybe at time of renewal or time of determining whether or not we want to continue operating this way or whatever that they do. We're seeing some opportunities to improve the hours on this site.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? What we've kind of seen here?
Yeah, I mean, we have a set amount of hours for this site, and contractually we're kind of bound to that. But what it's helped us do is say, hey, listen, we've seen that we can do better on this, significantly better. So, we look at it and say, okay, well, is there much we can do about it at this point? Well, probably not. But it does show us kind of proof of concept, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If done correctly, you do get the information you need out of the system. It gives you the data you need. It also tells you where you're missing. Like if you look at this slide, you see the line at the bottom where the green and orange is. You have all that purple. That's a guy who wore his vest in the morning, took it off, and left it sitting in the truck the rest of the day. So
Exactly.
It does identify those challenges too, as much as the efficiencies or where they're doing well. It's, hey, let's have a talk with this guy and find out what happened.
Yeah, I think one of the big things, right? We do see that. So on that 7th of April, basically we got 1.5 guys doing work, right? Because the afternoon for the second and almost the whole day for the third, we see either they weren't wearing their vests or they weren't moving. But if we go back and we look at April 7th, we can see a lot of this property is covered. I mean, we got some uncovered areas in here, but as far as the mowing is concerned, the majority of the site was performed by 1.5 guys, right? And I think that's where we can start to see, to your point of verifying production rates, right? If we're estimating at a 65,000 square feet on a 52, but we're completing 80,000 square feet on a 52, we should know that, right? So Obviously, it might be different by property, but we'll now know that this property has an opportunity to improve
Well,
on.
I think another interesting question is not only is it the property, right? Maybe it's the crew. If you have a really solid crew that's just constantly overperforming, can that be quantified? Can you say, hey, these guys using the system, using the data we're getting, hey, these guys are consistently beating our production rates by 10 to 15%. Does that give me the ability to be a little bit more aggressive in my pricing if I know that property is going to fall within the territory for this crew? Maybe, maybe not. But it raises these questions to think about and try to work through to grab those little pieces of efficiency that turn into a big ball of hours at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen. I mean, 10 minutes here or there, 15 minutes there, right? When you're talking across 40 weeks, across 500 crews, right? There's a big number at the end of that.
Yeah, it's basically the equivalent of the gas station runs.
Mm-hmm.
You have a crew that goes to the gas station every day. It's a 4-man crew. They spend 15 minutes. It's an hour a day.
Exactly.
Every single day. What's that add up to? What's that cost?
So what we're looking at here, just to kind of reiterate, is we have 3 guys that go out to the site. They're on site for 7 hours and 7 minutes or so. So our total man hours on the site are 20 hours, 46 minutes. Out of that time, we're seeing production for 12 hours, 21, right? So over 50%, about 60% of the time was production versus non-production. So the importance of the best usage and overcoming the hurdle of making sure the guy's awareness is critical, because if this guy's working, we don't know what he's doing.
Yeah, you don't get data if they're not using the best. I mean, that's just the end of it. So you have guys that wear them part of the day, take them off. They don't get charged. I mean, that's a huge hurdle to overcome. It seems like a simple thing. Hang the vest up, put the charger in it, and the crew intel from the hardware standpoint makes it very easy to do. It's just making sure it happens. That accountability of, hey, we're doing this to try to help out, but this is your portion of it. And your teams are going to have to understand it. Your managers are going to have to understand it. And at the end of the day, somebody has to own it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something I think we're continuing to work through. You have a lot of different things, different business solutions, right?
Yeah.
That you're in charge of. So who's going to own it on the other end, right? To say, here's the value you asked me to find, or it can't be found. Who's going to prove it?
Right.
All right, so we'll move on to the third poll here, driving forces for change. What's the strongest external pressure? And this is, I think, a good one for you, Shane. The strongest external pressure driving your company's new ways to improve operational efficiency today.
Yeah, it's make more money. That's what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do, right? We're not a lot of us run a nonprofit. We're trying to find these efficiencies to maybe they can pick up that extra site that's in the area, or we can finish a little bit early because we know in Florida from April to September it rains every day at 2:00. We're trying to get the guys in before that rain time. It's the labor, not having enough guys that show up on time. That's something everybody's facing right now. Shortage of labor, shortage of good labor. Those are all contributing factors to that's the pressure. Hey, I don't have enough guys that showed up today. Well, we've taken your route and we found, say 15 hours on that route that you've been able to cut. Well, it's a whole guy for a day. So you don't need 4 guys today. You can do it in 3. And it's proven. It's not something we're just handing out. It's you guys have been doing this.
Yes. Yeah. And we've seen it not only with you, but, some other clients. We just had a really good kind of case study that we'll be working on. But we're seeing that, the production factors that you're using are matching what we're seeing for mowing. And we're seeing that it matches the edging. When we get the data that we need, But a lot of times we're seeing that the overall time on site is exceeding what the plan shows, and we'll get into that here in a second, I think.
Yeah.
Uh, so I do have a question for you, Shane. It was posted. Now that you've had a chance to spot some of the inefficiencies with the vests and with the crew planner, what's the game plan from here? How are you thinking about fixing or acting on these gaps?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is, I'm looking at this from a different level. It's not just those couple guys that weren't doing this. It's about the scalability too, right? So I think it changes some of the discussions that we have with the crew. I think that we have to do a better job getting their buy-in and understanding why we're trying to do this. And I think that's going to go a long ways. I don't think we did a good job with that at first. I think the rollout was kind of, hey, we're not really sure how this is going to go. And it didn't give a good enough message to the team as to why it was important. And they haven't been engaged enough to have that buy-in, quite frankly.
Get that, yeah. And kind of the way that this all worked out, right? Matt Stinson kind of put me in touch with you quickly. I came down within, I don't know, a couple weeks of being introduced,
Yeah,
and then
it was 60 days, and we were rolling
yeah,
out.
yeah.
we,
Bob
we,
comes
we
into
were,
the
we were
office. He's
moving
like,
quick.
we're crews, right?
Yeah.
So the urgency was there, and I think moving forward, we know we're going to move forward quick, and there's going to be some challenges, but it's going to highlight the conversations that need to be had, the missteps and those things, and we can fix those. But we're moving in the direction of where we want to go.
I think it's about knowing your team too. If you can find somebody that's results driven, that's competitive, and try to pit a few managers against each other with some kind of incentive, I think there's some value there too. They'll push each other to be better. So it's certainly about the team. It's about picking the right group and getting that buy-in. Maybe you're a company that doesn't have a bunch of teams to pick from. You just have the one. Well, have the conversation and explain it to them, and try to get that buy-in, because if they believe in it, they're going to work it, and that's going to be less pressure that you have to put on them, and it's going to be better data, and at the end of the day that you're getting back, and that's your return on your investment.
For sure. Yeah. All right, so we're getting close. We got about 10 minutes, just over 10 minutes left. So I want to recap real quick, just kind of what we've talked about so far. Kind of the why United Land decided to partner with Top Green. I knew from the beginning you had informed me that the leadership team there was big on time studies, right? I think there was conversations about folks going out to the sites and kind of taking a look and seeing what's happening, and I've heard it from other companies. But with the Intel piece and the vest, the thought on that is, we can see what's happening, right? I think one thing that you guys do, right, the crew leaders managing the site and making sure guys are doing what they do, right, the way that they're supposed to do it. This is another level or layer to that, right? How did they move? Where did they stop one service and pick up the next? The dead walking. The three key areas that we're trying to improve here are the elimination of the dead walk, right? Because it's a killer to time, 15, 20 minutes here or there across 3 or 4 different services. And additionally, kind of segmenting the work in the right way. We see some crossover, not so much with you guys as we do maybe with some of our other, some other folks that we're working with, but giving guys a clear idea of what services they're going to handle in what areas, so they can keep it segmented and not have a lot of crossover. And then one of the big ones that I want to talk about, and we'll kind of roll into here, is I think this is a property that we've been focusing on quite a bit. From the plan, what you're looking at here is the plan piece for this site to what is actually happening. So Shane's team is out, they're working this site today and following the plan the way that we've laid it out here. So the
With some
goal,
minor modifications.
some modifications, right? And this is a back and forth. Can you talk to that? I mean, as far as how you plan and
I like to go out. I got to put my eyes on it. I'm kind of old school that way. So myself and the branch manager went out to the site. We had the plan with us, and we're looking at it. So, okay, well, what makes sense from our experience and from a crew perspective, right? Say, okay, well, I like how they had the mowing separated. I think that makes sense. But let's talk about what they're going to do when they get done. Who jumps on what? Where do they start? How do they move around that site? And it started opening up, a larger discussion as we're starting to talk through those pieces. And, we started talking about trimming, and we're talking about, okay, well, this guy's hard edging this week. What's he going to do the next week? Well, maybe he's on bed detail or whatever it is. And we started putting this plan together for the site. And I'm thinking, if we could just do this for every site that we have, and then kind of revisit that plan on a frequent basis, how much better could we be? Is it 10%? Is it 15%? Well, if it's 10, even if it's 10%, if you could be 10% better than you are right now, what's that mean to the bottom line? What's that mean to your customers? I think that's a big impact. Certainly for us it is. And so as we're walking around doing the site, yeah, we made some adjustments to the plan that Sean and his team sent to us, but having that dialogue really opened our eyes up to some other things that we were missing out on.
Yeah, exactly. And just to be clear, I mean, this isn't just AI saying, hey, from that, very objective point of view. I mean, it kind of is, but it's saying this is the time these tasks should take. These are the people you have. These are the equipment you're using. Here's a plan. But you still have to massage it a little bit, right? To make sure that it fits the way that your company
want to do that.
Operates.
You almost have to do that. You guys know your teams, your capabilities better than any computer is ever going to. And so it does take a little bit of a, massage and say, hey, does this make sense for my teams, my property, and for what we're able to accomplish? I would say for the most part, that answer is going to be yes, but it's going to take a few tweaks.
For sure. Yep. So what we see here is 6 hours and 35 minutes with 3 guys on site. So 19 hours, 46 minutes total crew hours on site. That gives us close to 90% production ratio time on site actually producing. If we look at some of the crew intel data that we have here, this is one of the weeks that we've seen. You can see that the total man hours on site and the production time are very close, very similar. About 44 minutes difference. It wasn't a lot of downtime. They took a lunch around 1 o'clock, right? We could see that they came out here. They had a purpose, a mission, and they came in and they got it done, right? The mowing's done.
They were on it that day. They were on it that day for sure.
Yep. And, it's great. They got off the site, 2:15, 2:30, 2:32. And, they actually beat our plan, right? So our total crew hours, we're saying 19 hours and 46 minutes. They were off the site in just under 17 hours. So
yeah.
How much of this would you say this highlights that the production rates that your team has traditionally been estimating with are, for the most part, accurate, right? Because we're seeing the time when they work this come out.
Yeah, I think they are, plus or minus a given delta, I think makes sense. It's never going to be perfect across everybody, across every piece of equipment, but it's something that we kind of honed in on from the beginning and said, hey, we don't want to use what the standard is. We want to really understand how long it takes us to do it. Anybody can go grab a production rate off of a vendor website. They're all out there. That doesn't mean that you can do that. And so our rates are very customized to what we feel like our guys can do and what we need to do to be able to be profitable.
Yeah. 100% agree to that. And then I think the piece of this is confirming that, right? If we're bidding off of the production rates, I mean, even if we're off 10,000, 15,000 square feet across all of the square footage that we're responsible for, it's a huge number.
Drop in the bucket.
Yep. So one thing, to your point, that this kind of uncovered was some additional conversations, right? So if we look at this site here, we see that they left at about 2:30. The next day, we see a return visit to do what we now know is pruning, right?
Yep.
So when we initially went through this and you observed this happening, your comment was, why couldn't we have just maybe done the pruning the next day? And then PGR and some other things were brought up. Can you talk me through kind of your thought process on this? And then
Yeah, so the estimate and the reality of the pruning on this site specifically don't match. I think we've got like 25, 26 hours in it. It's not enough. They're typically spending 2 full days in there to get this site pruned out. So when we're looking at this and I'm watching the guys move and they're doing a couple and then they jump across the street and then they do a couple more and they jump and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense either. So it's part of it is the movement, but then it's like, well, why aren't we just using growth regulator out here? There's so many plants out here that are fast growing plants. This site absolutely makes sense for that. If we're using that, we know that we can cut our prune time over the year by 40 to 50%. Well, if a 4-man crew, it takes them 2 days to do that, how many hours am I reclaiming by just using that tool? And that's where I think this particular software, Crew Intel, really helps because it's not just the data you get back. It's the conversations. It's the questions you start asking and you start digging deeper into the efficiency and the production and why are we doing this? Why are we not doing this? Should we be doing this? And that answer doesn't always necessitate change, but I think having the conversation is always a good thing.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it's important to highlight, from the plan to the intel, right? It's now opened up conversations around, pruning operations, consistent outputs.
And return visits. Nothing costs more than having to go back to a site. And this site for us is an hour and a half away, I think, from the branch. It's a long ride. That's a lot of windshield time.
Mm-hmm.
If you can eliminate windshield time, you're always going to be more efficient.
Yeah,
so
that's
when we're using the PGRs, do we need to come back for a second visit for this? I don't know. Maybe, but maybe it's not all day. Maybe it's a few hours.
For sure. Yeah, but it starts. I think the important piece, it starts the conversation. It highlights and it drives, right? If you show the account manager, production manager, and the team this, right? So you were there for basically 7 man hours and 2 buildings were done, right? Is that what you expected? Because who knows? They might have thought that they got more done, right? They're in the midst of it. And it's like, wow, that's what we did, right? Okay. And now they start to think about it a little bit more. And it's not to say, hey, you need to get 4 buildings done. It's just, are you okay with this? Does this make sense? And if they are, then great.
And in this instance, it probably did. If they haven't trimmed this for a while and there was a lot of growth, the cleanup takes longer. The trimming takes longer. There's a lot to unpack when you're just looking at this. And that's, I can't say this enough. Try not to use this as a hammer. Try to use it as a tool to learn and just be better.
For sure. Yeah. So I think to wrap up, we got about a minute left. Shane, if you can kind of go into a little bit about how you're thinking about Top Green, the scaling piece. I know other branches have asked. We got about 40 seconds. If you could just go into that. Quick.
Yeah. So as we're looking to roll this out across different organizations within our business, we're looking in different markets, different market segments. Hey, these guys are using this on route work. Let's put it on an on-site job and see what changes there are. Hey, we know this team is an overachiever. Let's put it there just to see what happens. We know these guys are struggling. Maybe their team is brand new. They have a bunch of brand new work. Let's put it there so that we can help understand our production versus our estimates. And these are the questions we continue to ask. And, it won't be the only time they get asked. We're going to keep asking these questions probably until I'm blue in the face.
For sure. You hit it right on 40 seconds. So the folks that are still there, if you want to have a conversation, you can connect with us. We'll have the team out in Vegas for LLTC Shane will actually be out there. We'll be
Yep.
connecting.
Yeah.
We'll be in Denver at Wilson 360 and then Arizona for Elevate.
You see me out there and just want to ask some candid questions, please feel free.
Awesome. Well, Shane, thank you. I appreciate your time and great conversation as always.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today.
Yes. Thanks, Shane.